If you've ever noticed that you need more alone time than most people, not because you dislike others, but because something inside you feels calmer when you're by yourself, this might explain something. Maybe after socializing, even with people you like, you feel mentally full. Not overwhelmed exactly, just saturated. You stop replying for a while. You retreat into your own space. You reset. And from the outside, it can look like distance, like disinterest, like you're pulling away. But internally, it doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like regulation. Because for some people, alone time isn't escape, it's restoration. People who need a lot of alone time often don't realize that this pattern isn't random. It usually reflects how their nervous system processes the world. Some people process experiences externally. They talk things through. They release emotions through interaction. But others process internally. They think before they speak. They observe before they engage. They absorb more than they express. And that internal processing takes energy, not because they're weak, but because their awareness is constantly active beneath the surface. They're noticing tone changes, facial expressions, subtle emotional signals. Even when they appear quiet, their mind is rarely idle. It's analyzing, interpreting, integrating. And over time, that level of internal activity creates a need for silence, not as avoidance, but as recovery. You might notice small behaviors that reflect this. You enjoy people, but in measured amounts. You rarely feel the need to constantly stay connected. You don't reach out just to fill silence. And when you're alone, you don't feel lonely. You feel like yourself again. Because alone time removes external input. No expectations, no emotional noise, no need to perform or respond. Just space. And in that space, your system recalibrates. This often develops early, especially in environments where observation felt safer than expression, where being quiet helped you understand situations before reacting, where reading the room mattered. So instead of immediately expressing everything outward, your system learned to contain more internally, to think first, to feel privately, to stabilize yourself from within. Over time, that becomes your default mode. Not because you dislike connection, but because internal stability became familiar, reliable, predictable. There's also a deeper emotional layer to this. People who need a lot of alone time are often highly self-contained emotionally. They don't always externalize distress immediately. They sit with it. They process it privately. They make sense of it internally before sharing it, if they share it at all. From the outside, this can look like emotional distance, but internally, it's emotional integration. They're not disconnected from their feelings. They're connected to them in a quieter way. And here's where it gets interesting. Most people assume needing a lot of alone time means you're antisocial, but often it's not about disliking people. It's about protecting your internal clarity. Social interaction introduces unpredictability, different emotions, different energies, different expectations. And while many people adapt to that quickly, others absorb it more deeply. They carry it longer. They reflect on it more. So alone time becomes a way to release what isn't theirs, to return to their emotional baseline. It's not avoidance, it's equilibrium. People with this pattern are often deeply introspective. They think about conversations long after they end. They replay moments. They reflect on meaning. Not because they're stuck, but because their mind naturally seeks understanding. They're not just experiencing life, they are interpreting it. And that interpretation happens most clearly in solitude, because solitude removes interference. It creates psychological space. There's also a quiet sense of safety in being alone. When you're alone, nothing unexpected happens emotionally. No misunderstandings, no sudden shifts, no emotional demands. Your internal environment stays consistent, predictable. And predictability feels safe to the nervous system, especially if unpredictability once felt destabilizing. So alone time becomes more than preference. It becomes protection. This is why people who need a lot of alone time are often calm on the outside. They're used to regulating themselves internally. They don't rely heavily on external stimulation to stabilize their emotions. They've learned how to return to equilibrium on their own. That doesn't mean they don't value connection. It means their connection with themselves is foundational. Over time, this shapes identity. You might start seeing yourself as independent, private, self-sufficient, someone who doesn't need constant interaction. And that identity feels natural because it reflects how your system learned to function most efficiently, not through constant external engagement, but through internal alignment. And it's also why forced social interaction can feel unusually draining, not because something is wrong, but because it interrupts your internal rhythm. It pulls your attention outward continuously. And when your system is wired for internal balance, that outward focus consumes more energy. So withdrawal isn't rejection, it's recovery. Another subtle pattern appears in how you reconnect. You don't always rush back into interaction. You return gradually, once your internal state feels stable again, once your mental space feels clear. Because connection feels best when it doesn't disrupt your internal balance. It feels best when it complements it, not replaces it. And the deeper truth is this: people who need a lot of alone time often have a strong internal world, rich thoughts, deep emotional awareness, complex internal processing. They don't depend entirely on external stimulation for identity or stability. They generate stability from within. And that internal stability becomes their anchor. This isn't emotional distance. It's emotional self-containment. It's the ability to hold your own internal state without constant external reinforcement. And while others may misunderstand it, your nervous system understands it clearly. Solitude restores order. It restores clarity. It restores you. When you look at it this way, needing alone time isn't random. It's not antisocial. It's not indifference. It's a personality pattern shaped by how your mind and nervous system learn to maintain balance. It reflects introspection, sensitivity, internal awareness, and emotional self-regulation. And once you recognize that, something shifts. You stop seeing your need for solitude as distance and start seeing it as information. Information about how your system preserves stability, how it restores clarity, how it protects your internal world. It was never about avoiding people, it was about maintaining yourself. Because for some people, connection restores them, and for others, solitude restores them. And neither is accidental. Both are patterns. Both are adaptations. Both are part of how a personality learns to survive and remain stable in a complex emotional world. If this pattern feels familiar, it means your system found its own way to protect your clarity, its own way to regulate your internal state, its own way to keep you balanced. It was never random. It was a pattern. And understanding that pattern is the beginning of understanding yourself. Because sometimes the quietest behaviors reveal the deepest truths.